Hello, my name is, well, that's not really important. You can call me Nero, after two of my favorite video game characters. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a bit of a gamer. I especially like Kingdom Hearts. It was actually what first got me into games, but that's not the point here. You're probably thinking, what is this crazy chick going on about? Get to the point already! Well, be patient for a sec. I'm getting there. So, as I was saying, I love Kingdom Hearts. Got all the games and stuff. Even made my own Kingdom Key in art class a couple years ago. So, a few hours ago, I got a package in the mail. It was just a little thing with a DVD disc inside. On it was written, "NAMINE'S STORY." Do you remember now? I stared at the disc for a while, not really sure what to make of it. "NAMINE'S STORY," I thought. I've never heard of anything like this being released. Shrugging it off, I decided to go put the disc in my PS2. I wasn't sure if that was what it was for, but I figured I could try putting it in my laptop if it didn't work. While I waited for the console to process the disc, I went to grab some chips and a glass of Pepsi. When I got back, the disc was loaded and showed a picture of Naminé, standing in the middle of a white room with her hands behind her back and a smile on her face. I couldn't explain it, but she looked different somehow. Like, her lips were forming more of a smirk than the sweet smile I was accustomed to, and her eyes looked like they were narrowed, almost glaring at me. Shaking it off, I sat down on my couch and picked up my old light gray controller and pressed start. When prompted, I selected New Game and the screen cut to black. For a split second, I thought I saw something. Thinking back on it later, I realized that what I'd seen was a close-up of Naminé's face, but it was splattered in something red. Deciding not to worry about it for the time being, I shook my head and focused on the game. It started out with a cutscene. Naminé was sitting in the room she'd stayed in at Castle Oblivion, drawing something that I couldn't see. Suddenly, she looked up at the screen and smirked at me, mouth forming words that I couldn't hear. The screen glitched a bit, and for just a second it looked like she was splattered with red. But when I blinked, it was back to normal, and I shrugged it off as my imagination. Then the image cut to looking over her shoulder to see her sketchpad. There, written in bright red crayon, was "Remember Naminé." I didn't understand. What was that supposed to mean? She began scribbling again. I watched each letter form large, red, and sort of messy. D, O, Y, O, U, R, E, M, E, M, B, E, R, N, O, W? Question mark. I stared blankly at the screen. What? Do you remember now? What in the world was that about? What was it supposed to mean? Do I remember what? I asked myself out loud. The screen changed again to show Naminé glaring at me, an expression of malice I'd never seen her wear before. What the hell was going on here? Suddenly, Naminé spoke, and this time I could hear her, though her voice was oddly staticky. Do you remember me, Nero? My eyes widened, and I stared at her, my mouth slightly opened in shock. What? Of course I remember you. You're right there, I told her, wincing slightly at my shaking voice and the fact that I wasn't speaking and the fact that I was speaking to a fictional character on my TV screen. She smiled then, but again it looked different, more like a smirk, and her bright blue eyes seemed malicious and slightly psychotic. She giggled softly, though her voice was still filled with static, and glanced off the screen to her left. Suddenly, she was covered in red splatters again, but this time it stayed that way. She came close to the screen, still smiling, and seemed to tilt it to where she'd been looking earlier. "That's good," she said cheerfully, as I stared in horror at the scene, "because if you didn't, you'd have ended up like poor Sora over there." She giggled again. Sora, he was hardly recognizable. His body was completely stripped of flesh, and what was left was leaned up against the wall, head tilted up and mouth open in a silent scream. There was a pool of blood around him, and written on the wall beside his body were the bloody words, "Do you remember now?" Something caught my attention, and I looked back at Sora's mangled corpse. No, I wanted to throw up then and there because Sora was still alive. He was looking at me, blue eyes wide with terror, and he seemed to be screaming something. Suddenly, it clicked, and just as it did, I could hear it. "Run! Escape before she gets you!" His voice was strangled and filled with unbearable pain. There was a flash of something, and there were crayons lodged in both of Sora's eyes, and he stopped moving. The pain too much for him. He was dead now. Then there was the sound of static-filled giggles again as Naminé walked around the camera and into view, standing beside Sora's body. "Oops, looks like Sora gave the game away." She turned back to the screen, smiling warmly. Or coldly, I suppose. She was calm, though her eyes were glaring at me through the TV screen. That smile, combined with her malicious glare, made me want to turn around and run for the hills, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, hardly able to breathe, let alone move. "Don't worry, Nero," came the staticky voice of the girl I previously thought to be so sweet and caring. "You can help me with my new picture. I'm sure you'll like it. Remember when you used to draw me all the time? Well, this time I'll draw you." She laughed. I was shivering, but not because it was cold. I was terrified. What was going to happen to me? Suddenly, Naminé disappeared from the screen, and my trance was broken. I shot to my feet and ran as fast as I could. I slammed my front door open and sprinted down the street, not sure where I was going. I just knew that I needed to get away from there. I ended up at my friend Becky's house, and that's where I am now. I've spent a couple hours here, and I haven't seen any sign of Naminé. Hopefully, I never will again. After this experience, I'm reconsidering having her as a favorite KH character. Hold on, I heard something from downstairs. I'm gonna go check it out. It's probably just Becky's parents coming home. Do you remember now?